wider professional practice in education and training, and our learning outcome for tonight is to understand professionalism and the influence of professional values in education and training. So first of all, welcome, and my name is Maria Mazovet, working in the education faculty. So I put this lovely light bulb here to ask you what you think professional practice in education is. What does it mean to you? What does being a professional in education mean to you? And I just want you to have a little think about that and reflect upon it, and we'll get some of your ideas in a minute. Okay, so if you would like to type it into the chat box, just anything at all. So for me personally, I think being professional is showing an example to students. It's being dressed in a professional manner. It's speaking in a professional way. You want to model professional behavior for the students to see. You want to know your subject, know what you're speaking about. All of these things contribute to being professional. So if you'd like to say anything at any point, you can raise your hands and I'll be able to see. Okay, no one's got anything to say just now. Okay, well, we shall move on. So our assessment criteria. So this is what you're going to be assessed on in this topic. So 1.1 is define the concepts of professionalism and dual professionalism in education and training. And the second one is explain ways in which own professional values influence own practice in an area of specialism. And I've made it clear, hopefully throughout my presentation, which assessment criterion we're going to be addressing. So I've split my PowerPoint into two halves. So let's move on to the first slide. So I put a quotation here from Cordingley in 2017, who says that adopting professional characteristics, knowledge and attitudes which are prescribed nationally, regionally and at school level, developing a personal professional pathway through these expectations and the demands. So this is basically saying different countries have different approaches to the idea of teacher professionalism. But most ideas about professionalism tend to be aligned with what Cordingley has said here. So teachers adopt professional characteristics. They have knowledge, which is professional, and they have a professional attitude. And these tend to be across a nation, across a country. So, and then we move on to the teaching standards for England. So there's actually a website you can look these up on. And these are the standards which all teachers in England are supposed to follow. There are different standards for teachers in Scotland, for Northern Ireland and for Wales. So in England, a teacher is expected to demonstrate consistently high standards of personal and professional conduct. It doesn't actually say any more than that. So for us to understand that statement, we have to understand what being professional means. If you look on the GTCS website in Scotland, they actually have a whole entire section on being professional and how they expect teachers to be professional. So it's much more clear. Okay, moving on. So this quotation has been taken from a white paper which was written by the government. So this was actually written under the Conservative Lib Dem coalition in 2010. And they actually wrote a paper on how they tried to change the teaching profession in order to apparently make it more effective. So it says the evidence from around the world shows us that the most important factor in determining the effectiveness of a school system is the quality of its teachers. The best education systems draw their teachers from the most academically able and select them carefully to ensure that they are taking only those people who combine the right personal and intellectual qualities. So this is a view of teaching which says the best ones are the most academically able. There isn't really a mention of being professional, well, not in this quote anyway. So they're saying the emphasis is on being academic and that these academic people have the right personal and intellectual qualities. So we need to think about being professional in terms of the political horizon, which is around a country at a certain time, because it does have an influence. So in comparison, so this is taken from the Teachers Union, NASUWT, and this is a policy paper that they wrote on teacher professionalism. Slightly different view here. So a broader vision of teaching is central to understanding its status as a profession. So they're saying that you can't talk about professionalism in a narrow way. So conceptualizations of teacher professionalism that fail to reflect these considerations fully cannot be regarded as a coherent and credible basis upon which to establish an effective national strategy for sustaining teacher quality. So this is kind of in direct relation to what the government was saying in 2010, that teachers are effective due to their academic capacity. So almost the opposite. They're saying that it's more holistic than that. And that there's we have a major need in this country for a national strategy for creating teacher quality and also sustaining it. So let's try to define professionalism. So in terms of education, this is quite a famous paper written by Hoyle in 1974. So he proposed the terms restricted and extended professionalism. So just looking at those words, it's quite clear what he meant by that. So the restricted professionalism, so that is more to do with teaching methods, skills and perspectives which are derived from immediate classroom experience. This is seen as more of a passive learning rather than frequent professional development. So all they're looking for here, all he's defining here in professionalism is an effective teacher, one that can teach, basically. In comparison, extended professionalism. So this is professionalism where skills and understanding are developed from an interaction of practical experience and analysis, which encompasses also educational theory, and that these professionals will have an understanding of social, economic, and political contexts. Also in extended professionalism, there is a big value placed on collaboration and networking, and also pedagogic and subject knowledge. So it's all encompassing, it's holistic, it's not just being able to stand at the front of the room and to teach. So extended professionalism is being reflective, being inquiring, and being transformative. And we're going to look further into these concepts on the next slide. So Mentor et al. 2010, they used Hoyle's restricted extended spectrum to summarize 4 conceptions of teacher professionalism. Excuse me while I just look at my notes. I'm going to forget what to say. Yeah, so number 1, the effective teacher. So this is the most dominant in current and recent government discourse. It has an emphasis on accountability through the national curriculum and assessment system. So in Scotland and Wales, for example, there has never really been a full national curriculum. There's more, teachers are given much more autonomy in that system. And the assessment system in England right now is quite dominant, and teachers are quite often working towards assessments. This can be seen as quite politically driven, and it's forcing an emphasis on technical skills. So teaching is seen as a technical occupation. So a reflective teacher. So this is emphasizing teachers as autonomous, active decision makers. It was first thought of by John Dewey, who you might have heard of, in the early 20th century. So he was one of the first educationalists to talk about experiential learning and um, to talk about being reflective in order to become a better teacher. And this idea was followed through with Pollard in the 1980s, who produced a series of books on reflective teaching. And these books emphasized personal professional development through practice. The emphasis was on applying theory and research, and then taking it into the classroom, and then reflecting on what happened in the classroom in order to improve. So then we have the inquiring teacher, so teacher as researcher, as said by Stenhouse in 1975. It's the idea that teachers take a research approach to their work. So teachers are encouraged to undertake small-scale inquiries, and through doing so, they develop their practice, and they can also share that with other professionals, helps them to develop. And then finally, we have the transformative teacher. And this idea is that teaching is actually an activist profession. So it's the idea that there are many things going on in the world, and that teachers can actually use their occupation as a way of getting messages across, and in order to make the world a better place. So that's some interesting ideas there on teacher professionalism. So here we have a quote from Selberg et al. In high-performing education systems such as Canada, South Korea, Finland, and Singapore, the policy on teacher education is a national priority. So teachers are educated in academic universities where theory and practice are combined to form a foundation for teaching that is on a par with other academic professions. So these countries are often the highest performers in the PISA tests, the PISA tests, and as such, they're often studied by other countries to see what they're doing right and what we're not doing so well. And especially in Finland, teachers are often educated to master's level in education as well as their subject. Everybody in Finland has access to free education from the age of, I think it's 3, might be 4, all the way up to 18. And then they have a free university is also free in Finland. And teaching in Finland is seen as a really good occupation. It's something that children want to do. So I've also put in an article here in The Guardian, just explaining a little bit more about that. So from that quote, it's interesting to think about that idea of professionalism, that the government's actually providing it in some ways, because it's providing free education, not only for teachers, obviously, for everybody, but teachers have access to that education up to master's level. So the higher education that you have, especially in pedagogy, surely the better you're going to be at teaching. And the idea of professionalism as well, that it's seen as a good profession because you're highly educated, you're also well paid, and they don't have as many behavioral difficulties as they do in other countries as well. So some interesting ideas there. Okay, so Venn diagrams, I don't know if you've seen these before, but they're used quite often in education, and they're quite helpful to summarize some ideas in a topic. So I'd just like you to take a couple of minutes and have a think. Can you summarize the topics related to teacher professionalism that we've discussed so far? And are they separate from each other, or are they intertwined? Are they overlapping, like the 3 circles on the diagram? And I'll show you mine in a minute, but there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a way to get you to think about the different topics and how they're interrelated. Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes to have a think about that. Sorry, I should have said that. I'm just going to mute my mic for 2 minutes because I've got a bit of a cold as well, so I might cough down the microphone. I'm just going to mute for maybe 1 more minute, just while you have a little think about that. And if you would like to share your ideas, please raise your hand. Or you can put a message in the chat box. Okay, if anyone's feeling a bit shy, you can just write something in the chat box and then I can read it out. And I'll leave you completely anonymous if that helps. So if you could just write your ideas into the chat box, that'd be really helpful. It's really good to share ideas. It helps you to think about the issues and the topics raised and to remember them. Okay, I'll give you another 30 seconds and then we'll move on. Okay, so nobody's going to participate in that one. Okay, that's fine, don't worry. So we'll move on to the next one. So this is my Venn diagram, nothing fancy, just a way of thinking how all these concepts come together in professionalism. So we have professionalism in the middle. You can see that all the circles are overlapping. And I believe teacher professionalism is a mix of subject and pedagogic knowledge. It's the teacher toolkit, your skills in the classroom, but it's also your values. And those values could be political, social, cultural. So yeah, that's my idea. So please don't put that in any of your assessments because that's just me. That's not anybody famous. Okay. So let's move on. How do we define dual professionalism on the other hand? So the word dual usually means two, something with two in it. So dual professionals are both subject and or vocational specialists and experts in teaching and learning. So a good example would be somebody who has worked in, let's say, a science lab in a hospital, and I'm just going to check, yeah. And then they've decided to go into teaching and they're going to teach biology. So they've worked in a scientific environment and they're then moving into an education area. So they've trained in the science and then they're training to become an educator. So they're dual professionals. And that can have some advantages and disadvantages. So disadvantages of dual professionalism. So teachers or these people who are dual professionals, these teachers, they may emphasize what is necessary to the industry that they've just come out of. And that could be a disadvantage because they're not teaching everything in an open-minded way, perhaps. Recent changes in government policy mean that teachers do not need to gain a full teaching award or qualification. And that's especially true in further education. So a lot of people are coming from industry and they're going straight into teaching without being taught how to teach or being taught about pedagogy or education. So that could be a disadvantage. On the other side, advantages, teachers could have contacts in the industry they've just come from, and that means that they can build good partnerships, which could be of use to the students. Their knowledge of the industry may help also with employability for learners. And they also have a good understanding of what employers want because they've come from industry. They haven't been in education all the time. So some disadvantages and advantages there. So here we come to what is education for? So this is Biesta 2015. This is his Venn diagram for the three functions of education. And he said that they were qualification, subjectification, and socialization. Some of those words might be a bit unfamiliar, so I'll just quickly explain them for you. So qualification. So that's the way in which education qualifies an individual. It means that they've been provided with necessary knowledge and skills. So socialization, that's the way an individual identifies with social, cultural, and political practices. And subjectification, the way education impacts an individual. So how a person takes his or her initiative and responsibility for their life, perhaps after they've left education, that might be a bit more applicable. So how they develop as an individual, I think that's what he's trying to say there. So here we have by Biesta again. This is from the same paper. So he says, much of what has been happening recently in educational policy and research in many countries worldwide is having a profound impact on educational practice, and more especially on the position of the teacher. So in this paper, Biesta is saying that education functions in relation to the three domains that I showed in the Venn diagram. And it also impacts these three domains. He argues that teacher professionalism is directly affected by the purpose of education, and that there needs to be a balance between the three domains. So that brings us back to, what is education for? Is it for wealth creation, cultural reproduction, social justice, individual rights, or environmental sustainability? Or is it a mix of all? And when we're thinking about that, we're thinking back to how teachers are professional in the classroom as well. So all the subjects are overlapping, just like in the Venn diagram. So this brings us on to Hattie in 2012. You may have heard of him. And he says that evidence suggests that teachers have a significant impact on students' learning. A significant impact. So why are they having a significant impact? Well, from his research on visible learning, he was interested in what works in the classroom. So he took thousands of studies, small scale studies from all over the world, and he put them all together in a big meta-analysis. And then he tried to figure out all the different interventions that teachers can make in the classroom and which ones were the most effective. But the question is this important? You could say yes, because if teachers have the knowledge of the best ways to teach, then surely the students are going to learn more. But is that what education is all about? Is it just about what the students are learning? Just some ideas for you to think about. Okay, let's move on. So we're now moving on to the second of the assessment criterion. Explain ways in which your own professional values influence your own practice in an area of specialism. So Marilyn Cochran-Smith and Susan Lytle in 1999 identified three types of knowledge about teaching, sorry, reading the wrong thing. So these were knowledge for practice, knowledge in practice, and knowledge of practice. Can you think about these types of knowledge and how your own professionalism is influenced by them? You could also think about it the other way around. So I'll just give you a minute to have a little think about that. Do your values influence your practice, or does your practice influence your values? So knowledge for practice. So this is received knowledge about teaching. And this is the stuff that we're reading in theory. It's usually generated by academics. It's the theory and the things like John Hattie came up with, what works in teaching. Knowledge in practice. That's what we gain through practice. It's a practical knowledge. It's what we learn when we're in the classroom. And then we have knowledge of practice. And this comes from teacher inquiry into their practice to challenge their current knowledge. So teacher identity, teacher professional identity then stands at the core of the teaching profession. It provides a framework for teachers to construct their own ideas of how to be, how to act, and how to understand their work and their place in society. Importantly, teacher identity is not something that is fixed, nor is it imposed. Rather, it is negotiated through experience and the sense that it is made of that experience. So this was written by Sachs in 2005. And it's the concept of professional identity, which is complex. The literature on teaching and teaching education shows that a teacher's identity shifts over time. And this shifts because it's under the influence of a range of factors, such as the interactions within schools and broader communities, political and social context in which teachers work. So teachers learn professional characteristics that are influenced by their context. It's of vital importance to support a teacher's sense of professionalism if they are to be empowered to bring excellence to their specialism. Any questions? You can put your hand up or you can write it in the chat box. I apologize if I spoke really fast, but I tend to do that. So I hope that it was all clear to you. So yeah, please just ask if you have any questions. Okay. So I have put together all the papers that I used in today's presentation. So here's all the references here. I might have missed one or two. If I have missed one or two, you could probably get it by going to your university library or whichever library you're using at the moment. You can just do or you can try a Google search. Yeah, so there's some good variety in there. So have a good read through all the papers. And there's hundreds more on the subjects that we discussed tonight. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good evening.